What's up, everybody? Can you hear me? Can you see me? Turn your cameras on immediately. What's up, Ivan? Give me a wave. How you doing?
I'm good. You can actually hear me.
Sweet. What's up, Ed? What's up, Jeff? Jeff, type in the comments. Tell me where you are right now, because I know you're always somewhere crazy. I follow you on Instagram now, and you're skydiving, doing all sorts of shit. So let's know in the comments. As you can see, I've got somebody with me today. We've got Simon, who runs PR in a Box, and he's going to explain a little bit more about what PR in a Box is in a second. What's up, Kurt? I can see you've just joined. And really the primary focus of today is about putting in all of the things behind the talk, so that when your talk has gone up online for people to see, you've got a plan in place to make sure that eyes get on it, because that's where the opportunities and all the good stuff can come from the talk itself, right? The legacy side and the bigger purpose that we've talked about in previous modules. So where are you? Welcome, Simon. There you go. Hi. I'm going to pass over to Simon. Hopefully you can see a screen that says quick start guide to PR. Can you give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you can, or you can't see that? If you're struggling to see it, in the Facebook group, I've posted the PDF that we're going to be going through today in there. So if you want to have that as a reference, because for whatever reason, Zoom's not giving us great quality, you have that there. But other than that, please ask Simon as many questions as you possibly can. I'm going to hand over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Alex. Fantastic. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. And I'm fascinated to sort of, go be part of this process, because Alex and I have been talking about, the work that he's been doing with you guys. It sounds like some incredible stuff. So I'm also looking forward to seeing some of your TED Talks when you guys get to that point. So today, really what I wanted to focus on essentially is, as Alex said, once you kind of created this content, how are you going to get it out there? How are you going to spread the word about what you're doing and, what you've got to tell people essentially. So just to give you a kind of a bit of a background into myself, I ran a PR agency for the last 14 years, which I've actually just recently sold when we created PR in a Box. And PR in a Box was a platform that was designed essentially to help small businesses to promote themselves. So my kind of history was I've worked with brands ranging from kind of Jaguar Land Rover, Barbados Tourism. We worked with the Savoy Hotel, and then right from the, Marriott and people like that. So right from these kind of big high level brands right down to kind of very, very small startup businesses and individuals, some celebrities, people like that. And we found that there were lots of people who were kind of branching out on their own that didn't have huge budgets to spend on PR, but wanted to be able to do it still. So PR in a Box was kind of born as a result of that it's a piece of technology that helps people to do their own PR. So if you just see on the screen, up at the top, basically the way that this technology works, I won't bore you with it too much, but just to kind of give you a quick heads up, essentially up at the top of the screen you have, actually I can show you them on the live, on the actual screen, because it's a bit clearer on there. Sorry, I'm just being really annoying here.
No, not at all. We can do that. Is that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. So basically up at the top of the screen around here, you've got what we call the timeline, which essentially helps you to kind of program all of your content and activity. Now for you guys, if you've got if you're doing a talk, what you can essentially do here is you can decide when you want to be promoting yourself, what's the best lead time into that. So that you users will essentially put in a project, and then they'll build a project. They can say what activity they're looking to do. And can I move this across? Yeah. So you would click on here, let's say, promote, I can spell, promote talk. And then let's say your talk is going out sort of in, I don't know, like May next year. And then essentially what you do is you select the pieces of activity that you want to do. Now we'll go into this in a second when we're talking about how to get yourself out there. But, you know, for instance, let's say you want to send a press release out, you want to do some social media, and then that will populate your timeline, and this will give you reminders of what to do, when to do it, how to do it. So if you're sending out a press release, what we'll say is, well, you know, 120 days away from when you want to be going live, you need to write that press release. You need to start sending it out to long lead media there, and you need to then, you know, a month later, you need to be getting it to the short lead media, and et cetera, et cetera. We'll go into all of that later on. But then also what we can do here is you can write press releases on the software. So you can click on this and essentially start to shape your messaging. And then also we have a PR in a Box support team that you can send it over to. They can do the proofreading and things like that on there. So it just means that you kind of got the advice and guidance from a PR professional without spending an absolute fortune. And then our media list section, this is really important. That this is actually where you'll find the people to send it to. And, you know, one of the challenges that people face when they are promoting themselves is actually not knowing who to send it to. If they want to send it out to media, if they want to spread the word on social media and things like that. So on here, you can actually find loads and loads of journalists. So we go, let's say TED Talk. So if wanting to, let's pick a particular sector. So we're looking for a journalist, let's say, who is based in the UK, writing about, is there any particular sector these guys are?
Technology.
Okay.
Keep it fairly broad.
Great. So then what this does is it essentially searches through social media, it searches on Google, and it looks for, you know, different people who are writing about different subjects. So this will be the place where you kind of build your media list essentially. So it'll give you their contact details. You can see articles that they've written previously. You'll show their social media handles, all of that kind of stuff. So you can also do your social media posting on here and that kind of thing and get extra support from the team. But that's enough about that. I'm going to get back to the actual talk. But you can see how those kind of tools really sort of help small businesses and individuals to promote themselves. And then we'll just
back again.
Yeah, sorry, we'll go back to the talk.
The person's bookmarks. Cool.
Excellent. So moving on from there. So there's just a few things to consider when you're actually promoting yourself. So the first thing really is that anybody can promote a brand or person. I think that's really crucial. And, you know, when you guys are putting together your talks and things like that, it's really important to start looking at kind of, you know, what it is exactly that you're saying about yourself and really what you're trying to get out there. Essentially, there's more to communications and PR than a magazine article. And I think, again, promoting yourself as an individual. I don't know if you guys, when you're going to be doing your talks, are you going to be doing a talk as sort of promoting you as an individual, or to sort of look at...
It's more promoting an idea or a discovery that they found. So it's not a me talk.
Okay, that's which is great. And which leads me on to the next point that, you know, people buy lifestyles and not things. You know, essentially if you're spreading the word about a particular belief or a particular item or something like that, that's really what's going to kind of gauge an interest from other people. And I think also what is crucial when you guys are looking at promoting yourself, that actually, by becoming a kind of an expert and an influencer in a particular area, that's really what's going to get people excited about you. And that's what's going to really drive the promotion. And the best person to promote you and what you're talking about is you. You know, journalists, people on social media, they want to hear from the, you know, it's like from the horse's mouth, rather than it being something that comes from a PR agent or something like that.
It's funny you say that, actually, because someone applied to speak at TEDx Clapham with me a few weeks ago, but they didn't apply themselves, their agent applied.
Oh, really?
And I was like, they were like, this particular person really wants to speak at TEDx Clapham. And I was like, well, if they want to speak that much, why don't they ask me themselves?
Exactly, yeah, completely.
And then I never heard from them again.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think that, you know, in this day and age, we've created a world of dialogue rather than being on a monologue. And so actually, if you can start the conversation with that person, you know, people are so excited about being able to kind of interact with celebrities on social media and things, because ultimately that's getting an insight into that person's world. So if anything that you guys are doing join from a talk point of view, you know, I think it's really important that people can engage with you as an individual rather than an agent or something like that. So that's something to really consider. So these are just a few statistics, and you know, of sort of from a promotional point of view. So 70% of consumers prefer getting to know a company via articles rather than ads, and I think that this you know, sort of tracks through to individuals as well. And actually having editorial content out there about you or your talk or your beliefs or whatever it is that you're wanting to promote is really crucial to be looking at the editorial front of things than sort of paid promotions and things like that. And I guess the sort of art of PR essentially is about getting that conversation going, whether it's with journalists or whether it's on social media. Which leads me on to the fact that, you know, 2.34 billion people are using social media at the moment, or this was in 2016. Google did an interesting piece of research, and they found that in order for a person to buy from a business, they need to have 7 interactions with that brand. And I believe that that's exactly the same when you're promoting yourself. So really what we want to kind of cover today is ways of you building up those 7 interactions with people who might be interested in what you've got to say. So maybe there's a website about you, maybe you have a social media profile, is there another video, you've got your TED talk, you know, all of these things that are going to be building up to create those 7 interactions that are going to generate an interest in the conversation about you as well. So how do you do it? And feel free to chip in with questions and things. You know, if there's something that isn't making sense, or there's something that's not relevant to you that you'd like to sort of me to expand on to make it relevant to your to yourself, then, you know, feel free to chip in. So essentially, I've built for today's talk what we call the kind of quick start PR guide. Now there's no hard and fast rule of how to promote yourself, but what we like to do is kind of like use this as a jump off point. And essentially the best way to go about this is to look at taking the results from the end of this activity and tweaking it, and, you know, look at the things that have worked, look at the things that haven't worked, do more of the things that have worked and less of the things that haven't worked. And it sounds really basic, but people sort of get really tied into this idea of, you know, it must be done this way, and we must, you know, I need to go and talk to this person, I need to go and ask this person this, and but, you know, and it doesn't need to be like that. You've got to see what feels right for what you're doing in particular. So just to kind of run through this, the first thing is about research and planning. Now, if you are creating these incredible talks and are going out and inspiring people, you've obviously done a lot of research on that particular subject or that particular topic. And I think taking that as the start of your promotion is really, really important. So, you know, what is it about that particular subject that makes you tick, and therefore you can pass that on to other people and inspire them by this particular subject. And so use some of the research you've got. You know, journalists and people on social media and any kind of promotion, people love statistics. You can back up your research with, you know, with actual statistics that are correct is really important. You know, I had a conversation with a journalist from the Mail Online recently, and, you know, one of the things that she was saying to me was that, you know, when she used to work on the Daily Mail, and when she was on the Daily Mail, she was writing kind of like 1 or 2 articles a week. Now on the Mail Online, each journalist has to put out 12 articles a day, and, you know, that kind of those sort of statistics are just bonkers. So what that also means is that they become sloppy with kind of statistics and things like that, and fact checking and grammar and things. So if you can make sure that anything that you're sending out about, you know, yourself is really factually correct, that's a really important place to start with. So then moving on to sort of how to pitch. Now, what I would suggest here is that you've got to kind of tease people into wanting to do something to feature you guys. So let's use the sort of the conversation around journalists as an example here. So forgetting about social media for a minute, but looking at journalists and how we can get them to start writing about you. So essentially you've got to create what we call the sort of the hook. Now, obviously you've got the hook from the point of view of the talk that you've put together. And I think that's a really important place to start. And then the best place is actually to get in touch with them. So create a list of people who you want to actually send stuff out to and you think are going to be relevant, you think are going to be interested. When I wrote a book called PR in a Box, and when I was doing that, we interviewed about 200 journalists and editors. And one of the things that they all said was the sort of biggest bugbear was actually that people approached them and hadn't researched what they do or who they've been talking to or what they've been writing about. And I think that your first port of call is to really start to research these people. It's much better to send something to 20 people who are exactly right and are really interested in the subject that you're talking about, rather than sending out to 200 people who actually don't really give a shit. So start to put together your pitch. I would suggest reaching out to them with a small paragraph. Luckily you guys are going to have the content of your talk, so I would include a link into your talk, but just something, 4 lines really is all you need to kind of get somebody hooked in. And then they'll come back to you if they're interested. Then they'll come back and say, can I learn more about this or whatever it might be. I would also suggest doing a kind of a teaser of your talk, because they're probably not going to want to sit through a big long talk straight away. So actually something that's going to hook them in, a little teaser, and then actually they'll come back to you and ask you for more information.
And will you put that in the email that you send them?
I would add it as a link. I'd say don't put big attachments in there. Send it as a link somewhere that they can click on, whether it's YouTube or something like that. Journalists get sort of afraid by big links. If you've got imagery or anything like that you want to send out to the media, send low resolution images to begin with. If they're interested in the imagery, then they'll ask for high resolution images later on.
Why send low res to begin with?
Well, just because it clogs up their inbox, and if the media are kind of on their phones and things like that, and then they want to have a quick scan of these pictures, if they're sitting there downloading 15 megabyte pictures, they're going to be really pissed off with you. Whereas actually, if it's something that's a megabyte or something like that, they can just scan through quickly.
I guess it also shows that you know how to play the game, and they can be quite like
completely. And then on that matter, I'd say if you're contacting print journalists and you want print journalists to feature you or what you're talking about, then make sure you do have the high resolution images after to be able to send them if they ask for them, because the chances of losing a story because you don't have the imagery is fairly high. And whether that's something that represents what you're talking about, or if it's pictures of you or whatever it might be, just make sure that the images that you've got are high resolution, but send out the low res ones to begin with. The next one is creating your story. Now, when I was running my PR agency, I used to say to the team, I was like, you've got to, if you're going to reach out to the press, you've got to be able to nail your story in 30 seconds. So getting your elevator pitch is really, really crucial here. Now, if you hit 5 years ago or so, you'd be able to pick up the phone and start calling journalists. Journalists just don't answer the phone nowadays. So the best way to contact them is by email. But again, make sure you can get the story down, as I said before, to sort of like 4 sentences or something, or 4 lines. It's really, really crucial to be able to nail it in that very short, succinct.
We've done a bit of work on that.
Brilliant.
When it comes to applying for gigs.
Okay.
So you guys, when we were looking at that question, tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
What we've sort of created there is probably, you should, and in fact, the ones that we've created, Ivan, I know you sort of pioneered the revolution for that and have done pretty well, because you've got your talk coming up.
Brilliant, congratulations.
But I think, it's about having as many mini hooks in there as possible. So that if you haven't necessarily got your that angle right, they found another angle that they could potentially take as well.
Yeah, completely. So really get that that introduction nailed, because not only will it help you for getting the talks and things like that, but it will really help with your promotion of your speaking as well. So once you've created the story, then I would suggest building a media kit, a press kit. So when I say press kit, it sounds much more complicated than it is, but I would do kind of a basic press release. You'll find on PR in a Box, we've got like a template for a press release, which just gives you a kind of a good basic understanding of how to structure things. If any of you guys have a press release or anything like that you want me to have a look at, and I can see whether it's media worthy, then feel free to send them over, and Alex will give you my contact details and things. But it's the easiest structure is to think like a journalist. So when you're creating a press release, I would start off with a really incredible headline, and if you can get something that really does sound like a headline in a newspaper, they're much more likely to take that and use it and use your story. So just start off with a headline, put a teaser paragraph in, and then put some more information down at the bottom, some quotes in there from you. And, you know, as I say, it's without knowing more about what you guys are particularly speaking about, I have to be kind of fairly generic here. But, you know, if there's anything that kind of, you know, pops up about your particular talks, then feel free to ask away. Then you've got to build the media list. Now, already you've done the research on the media, and, you know, there's various different tools for helping you to build the media list, PR in a Box included. And you can start approaching people. So you'll send out your, I would just send the paragraph and your video to begin with, and then start to talk to the press. Now, social media within this is really crucial. There's no point you going out with one story to the journalists and then a totally different story on your social media. So make sure you're consistent across all platforms. Saying that, also make sure that the content you're putting out is unique for each platform. If you start to put the same stuff everywhere, then you'll just end up with Google, you know, sort of downgrading you from an SEO point of view. So you know, with your social media, I don't know how sort of social media savvy you guys are, but what I would say is choose the channels that you know you can service and you know you can service regularly. Don't start to try and do too many channels and then just end up with crap content on a few different channels, rather than actually picking one and being really strong on that particular channel. You know, interestingly, sort of Twitter was kind of on a decline up until sort of the last 12 months, I would say. And actually now Twitter is sort of having a bit of a resurgence. If you've got a particularly visual brand, then I think, you know, obviously Instagram is great for that. You can also sort of spread a bit of messaging within Instagram as well, whereas, you know, Twitter is you know, you get 140 characters and your image, unless they actually are going to do their extended.
I think they've started it.
I think they did a trial, but I don't know whether it's actually is kind of completed. So the other thing as well is you can use different channels to talk to different audiences. You know, if you have multiple audiences that you're trying to reach, then, you know, you pick a channel that you think is going to be most relevant to them. You know, Instagram was kind of a much more useful channel, whereas actually now we see that it's picking up and spreading more into the kind of the sort of art demographic rather than the kind of the teenagers. But, you know, and then Facebook seems to be kind of for an even older audience still. But, you know, make sure that whatever you're doing, you're consistent with it and you're putting stuff out there. If you put something out and then you don't see another post for a month, then it's kind of, you know, it's not quite as relevant, and you won't keep that sort of the buzz going.
The same for those of you who haven't landed your talks yet, because one of the first things event organizers do is check to see how active you are online, because there's an advantage to somebody who's got lots of followers and has got good engagement, because it means we're going to get more views on your talks, which makes us look good. Yeah. It's very selfish.
and it's completely true that, you know, we work with a big model agency, and one of their criteria now when they're signing up models is that they want them to have more than just a pretty face, essentially. That actually what they, you know, quite often what they look like is that they want an extra interest. They want people that have had social media and things like that. So then once you actually put all this together, then you really want to be getting out and talking to the press. As I said, I'd start off with an email. If you can call them and you know, approach them on the phone, if you feel confident about that, give it a try. You know, some of the smaller publications, you know, will answer the phone, but actually if you're reaching out to the bigger publications, then, you know, that's probably not the best way to approach them. What I would say is, you know, we get lots of people coming to us and saying, I want to be in the Telegraph and I want to be on, you know, GQ magazine or whatever it is. I'd say, you know, what you find is journalists will look at what other journalists are saying, and the chances of landing a smaller publication are much easier and is much more likely. So I would say, you know, by all means, feel free to approach the big publications. But what you will find is actually if you get a bit of chatter and a bit of news in some of the smaller publications, then once you get in touch with the bigger boys, then they will start Googling you and they'll see that there's other content out about you and other people have been interested in what you're talking about. So then you'll have a greater chance of actually nailing some of those bigger titles. You know, coming back to the Google research, the more that you can have out there, the more interest you're going to find that people will take in your brand. Following on from doing that, you really then want to start it with sort of following up with the media. You know, there is no magic formula to actually getting press coverage around your brand. But what I would say is that the more consistent you are and the more that you follow things up and you persevere, that's when you'll start to see it. You know, if you expect to send out a press release and then get loads and loads of press coverage straight away, it won't happen. It's a slow process, but once you actually get going and once you start to see some people talking about you, then you'll find that there's a kind of will be a bit of a sort of swell in the number of people that will start to write about you. And then, as I say, you know, move on to your next campaign, but take your learnings from that first, you know, mail out. You know, did you find that, say, for instance, the tech press were much more interested in what you had to say? Was it smaller publications or bigger publications? Or, you know, did you find that magazines over in America were more interested in what you had to say? You know, just test the water and you know, there's no magic formula to this. You know, really you've got to make sure that you can kind of dip your toe into the water, see what works, see what doesn't work, and then go from there. And the same thing with your social media as well. You've just got to be consistent and keep getting stuff out there. I mean, I have a sort of a rule that I call the dinner party rule, that essentially don't talk about anything to the media that you wouldn't bring up at a dinner party. You know, I've had clients of mine that have come to me and said, you know, oh, our CEO's having a baby. Can we get a press release out about this? And I'm like, it's not interesting. You know, if you think people are going to be interested in your story, that will make a story. But if you're not prepared to talk about it at a dinner party, then it's probably not going to be of interest to the journalists. The other thing as well is, don't put something out just for the sake of putting something out. If you don't feel that you've got your messaging and your story straight, then it's probably not the right time to be getting something out about you. You know, once you've kind of developed that story and developed your talk, for instance, you know, then start to look at getting it out there. But if you don't feel it's something that you can share with people straight away, then that's fine. You know, wait until you've developed that messaging. So communication strategy. This is just one thing to sort of look at. I can email you guys with this sort of in a Word document as well, if that helps. Essentially what we do when we're starting off doing a little strategy for people and brands and things like that is just looking at all of these different areas. So as I touched on before, you know, the first thing to consider is, you know, who are you? You've worked on your kind of pitch and you've got that paragraph. So really, you know, make sure that you kind of can humanize what you're talking about. People prefer talking to people rather than brands. So, you know, obviously you guys are doing a talk that's focused on something that you're passionate about as an individual, which is a great place to start. But really start to lay that down in your communications to people. Why are you talking about this thing? What is it that makes you tick about that particular item? You know, if you're passionate enough about that thing to do a talk about it, then lay that down on paper and share that with people and really start to get it out there. You know, whether that's in a press release or an email to a journalist, or whether it's on social media, or if you're recording videos to put out onto the internet and things like that. You know, tell people why it's important to you. You know, they want to understand where this has come from. You know, you haven't just woken up one day and gone, this is my thing. You know, it's built up over a period of time and you've developed a passion and an enthusiasm about it, and share that. You know, people want to see where that passion comes from. And I think if you can communicate that to people, then that will set you off on a really strong pathway to getting coverage and raising awareness around you and what it is you're talking about. We've talked about the story. You know, you've developed this story in your talk. So, you know, if you can lay that down in some way, shape or form in a press release, then that's super important. And then your audience, like, who are you actually trying to reach? Now, this is something that I think people really don't nail properly when they're trying to communicate about themselves or about their business. The way that I would suggest doing that is imagine that your audience is a single person. So if you were trying to communicate what you're doing to somebody, you know, who is that person? Really, really nail it down. Are they male or female? Are they based in the UK? Are they based in America? Where are they? Where do they live? Do they have children? Are they married? What do they read? What do they watch on TV? If you can really understand who your audience is, that will set you off on a consistently strong path to actually getting your brand out there. And I know it sounds kind of a bit basic, and you're probably saying to me, oh, but there's loads of different people who I want to talk to. If you can nail this sort of core individual, then you can actually really expand out from there and develop a much wider audience. But I would say start off with that first person and use your initial communications with media and social media as if you're talking to that person. And you'll find that actually if you have a sort of a kind of a one-to-one type conversation with somebody, you will get a much stronger brand recognition and sort of personal recognition from the audience you're trying to target. That will also lead you into selecting which publications you talk to as well. You know, I mentioned before about sort of selecting a smaller group of people to send it to rather than kind of pebble dashing loads of people. And once you've got your audience nailed, that will really help you to actually decide who to talk to and which journalist to approach, because that's going to really help with promoting yourself. Now, I say product in here. Now, I use this word in a sort of a loose sense of the term, that, you know, you are the product essentially here. So why are people going to be interested in you? What is it that you've got to say that is different from anybody else? And, you know, what do you want to do with, you know, your kind of brand recognition? You know, if you get some press coverage about what you're talking about, would you like to be on TV doing as a spokesperson on the news? Do you want to get on radio programs and things like that? Really, you've got to see, what do you want to do with your product? If you can look at having an end goal for where you want to end up, then that will help you along the path to promoting yourself and actually getting the word out there. Look at your competition. Now, this is super important. You know, is there anyone else out there that's doing what you're doing? You know, why are you better than them? Why is your story more interesting? And also look at what they're doing. You know, are they getting press coverage somewhere? Have you seen them on a news program? Are they the commentators in your particular field? And if they are, what are they doing well and why are they doing it? And what can you learn from that? And I'm not saying here, copy this and use exactly what they're doing. But if they're doing something well, there are learnings here. And, you know, I mentioned before that there are no kind of hard and fast rules to how things should and shouldn't happen, but, you know, learn from what works for other people. You know, I think there are some brilliant businesses that I love that I'm constantly looking at what they put out on social media, where they're at in the news, how they're messaging things. You know, you should do the same thing for yourself as a personal brand as well. And then look at the channels of where you're going to get your message out there. You know, do you want this to be in a newspaper? Do you want it to be in a magazine? Do you want it to be on social media, etc.? So select those channels and really make sure that you focus on what's important to you. You don't have to start with everything all in one go. You know, in the same way as with planning your social media channels, look at, you know, where your media outlet channels are and what are going to be your big focuses, and also what's going to have the best impact on developing your brand. And the final thing on this is what I call the timeline. And essentially, this is really making sure that you get your information out at the right time. You know, again, without knowing a huge amount about what you guys are individually talking about or planning on talking about, you know, I'll use the example of the fragrance industry, for instance. So, you know, people who are creating fragrances tend to have a big push on fragrances going out at Christmas time and for Valentine's. Now, there's no point really them sending stuff out in, say, March, because then it won't fit with the publications and what the publications are writing about. So if you have a particular subject that you're talking about, when is that subject going to be of the most interest to your audience? You know, if you're talking about a particular technology, is that relevant to a time of year? Is that relevant to something that's going on in the world at a particular time? So I would say build a timeline that will focus on sort of when is your kind of key target time for the media, and build towards that. I mentioned before about the PR in a box technology kind of backdating everything. Do the same thing here. I would sort of, you know, if it's around the time when your talk goes out, then obviously that's a sort of a crucial moment. You know, do you want to get people talking about your talk before it happens or after it happens? You know, do you want to create a buzz beforehand so that you can build an audience, or do you want to talk about the success of it so that it can lead on to another talk in the future? And this will vary from person to person, but work out what's right for you. And I'd start off with a spreadsheet and, you know, kind of backdate everything on there, put the different months in and work out what you're going to do in the months leading up to that. You know, write out a social media. I can send you over as kind of template as well for kind of a little marketing plan if that's useful. But basically, you know, look at what you're putting out on social media. Look at are you sending a press release out? Are you releasing a video? Are you going to put notes out about your talks to people? You know, it doesn't have to all be about press coverage. There's loads of different ways that you can promote yourself. But, you know, how do you, you know, what if you're buying a product, where do you see those products? And, you know, you've got to do the same thing for your talk. So what inspires you to purchase, or what inspires you to take an interest in a cause or a subject? And, you know, and use that as learnings when you're planning out your campaign.
The internet can be quite a good one for that now, because there are all these there's a day for everything on social media now.
Yeah, exactly.
I met a load of TEDx organisers last year, and one of the new TEDx organisers was like, how can you predict whether a talk will go viral? Basically, you can't.
You can't, no, exactly.
However, one of the guys who had given a talk, he was a spoken word poet who happened to be in the room. He was doing a talk about education, or a poem about education, and it just blew up on the internet. But his talk had been.
I remember that one. That wasn't the courtroom one, was it?
The same guy.
Yeah, that was
same guy.
Great.
So he ended up. That talk had been out for months and months and months, but then it was first day of school or something like that. That was what was trending at the particular time, and somebody had found it, and it just ended up in the right place at the right time.
100%. And you know, one of the things that is key to sort of keeping an eye on here is what we call kind of slow news days. So, you know, is there a particular subject that's being talked about at that time that could be relevant to what you're passionate about and what your talk is about? If it is, you know, use that day to hit the media desks and hit the news desks to actually tell them about your talk, because like Alex said, you know, that could be the day when they just need that little bit of content and yours just fits the bill, and suddenly you find yourself on Sky News. You know, those are the things. And other days you can have the best story in the world, but, you know, Prince Harry has just got engaged and suddenly it's eclipsed by that particular thing because that's all everyone wants to talk about. So, you know, take time to see when the slow news days are. I always say, you know, things like in between Christmas and New Year, because all the PR agencies are not working, and it's just the news desks that are there. So if you've got something that fits with what's happened in the news over those couple of days, get it out to them then. You know, it's just an opportunity. And, you know, you'll find that, I mean, you'll contact journalists and they'll say, thanks very much, but actually this isn't of interest to me. And then a month later, they'll come back to you and say, do you know what, we've just had a meeting about this, and actually the thing that you mentioned to me the other day is suddenly relevant to an article that we're writing about such and such a thing. You know, same thing on social media. You'll see the kind of zeitgeist bubbling through around a particular subject. Jump on that bandwagon, and if there's something that you can connect into your passion and enthusiasm, get on there, start a conversation with people, have a dialogue with them going. And, you know, even if that means actually challenging them and kind of slightly sort of upsetting some people, but if you can spur a conversation or a debate, then that's brilliant, and that will lead on to other things for you. So I just want to kind of finish with a few sort of tips and tricks. So the first one is sort of be discoverable. You know, there's no point in you putting out information about yourself if you have a rubbish LinkedIn profile, or someone can't actually find out more information about you online. So, you know, if you have a blog, make sure your blog is up to date. If you have social media profiles, make sure they're all really relevant and as up to date as possible. Again, coming back to this Google thing, you know, the 7 interactions, you know, make sure that people can build those interactions with you. You know, if you're going to be doing teaser videos on YouTube or something like that in the run up, you know, make sure that they're up and running before you start getting in touch with people, because people want to find out as much about you as possible. You know, content is king, and it sounds really cliche, but it really genuinely is. And the more you can get out about yourself, and the more that you can sort of push out there from a content point of view, the more chance there is of someone being able to find you. I would also say that existing contacts are the best place to start. You know, talk to your friends. If you're promoting your talk, really make use of the networks that you've developed already. You know, is it on social media? You know, do you have a sort of database of email addresses for your friends and family and things like that you can tell them about what you're doing? Ask for favors. You know, don't be afraid to contact people and go, I'm doing this talk, it's about this. Do any of you guys know anyone in the media that might be interested that you can put me in touch with? You would be amazed actually when you reach out to people and ask them for introductions, how many people actually happen to know a journalist or happen to know some incredible social media influencer or something like that can kind of spread the word about what you're doing. I've mentioned the dinner party story already. Nurturing your contacts is super important. You know, if you reach out to media, social people on social media and things like that, don't just be the kind of one-trick pony that you get in touch when you need something. You know, be the person that suggests something to them. Is someone, you know, do you see someone chatting on social media about a particular subject? Even if it's not relevant to you, be that person that says, oh, actually, I've got a link to something that might be of interest or whatever. And you'll find that people become much more loyal to you if you're not just asking for something all the time, rather than, you know, actually sort of just being the person that gets in touch with them when you want them to promote what you're doing. You know, have confidence. I always think that journalists kind of will sniff out weakness in people. You know, if you're reaching out as a kind of an influencer and you know, an opinion former on a particular subject, be the confident person that they want to be, that sort of, they want to be the mouthpiece of that particular subject. Know your facts. You know, don't just be, you know, as I say here, knowledge, not just anecdotes. You know, don't be the person that just can tell great stories about something. You've got to be able to back it up. If somebody asks you a question about it, you know, you've got to be unflustered about that, because that's what will inspire confidence in the media as well. And the final thing is a call to action. You know, if you're reaching out to a journalist, what are you wanting from that person? You know, do you want them to write about you? Do you want them to come to your talk? Do you want them to mention you on social media? Whatever it is, don't be afraid to ask. But have a call to action in there. You know, there's nothing worse than just putting something out that just, you know, just falls flat, because there's no point of what you're sending. You know, as I say, you are super confident about this particular subject and super knowledgeable about this particular subject. So, you know, pass that on to the journalists and make sure that there's a reason for getting in touch with them. And in the words of Richard Branson, a good PR story is infinitely more effective than a front page ad. You know, if you can, these journalists have built a reputation based on their knowledge and their experience in a particular industry. You know, if you can get them talking and evangelizing about what it is that you're passionate about, it will go so much further than anything you could ever pay for in an advert. So that's pretty much it for me. Does anybody have any questions, I think?
If you've got some questions, type them in the box. I've got some questions, just to fill any potential voids while you're typing. So my first question for you is, how do you stop it being tiring? Because I know a few people who've gone and got their talk out, and they sort of get to a point where they think, there's only so many times I can tweet my own talk out, and there's only so many times I can write an article about my experience going through that TEDx side of things.
I think I would say the way to keep it interesting and the way for it not to become exhausting is to, I know it sounds weird, but to not talk about your talk. You know, once you put the talk out there, once you've created that content, you don't have to kind of keep on going on about that particular thing, but feed into it, you know, add to the conversation, add to that dialogue. You know, if you're reskinning the same content over and over again, it will get boring. But so what you need to make sure you're doing is adding to that. So, you know, without having a specific example there, you know, if you start, let's say you've created a story about a particular technology that's going to change the world in some way, shape or form, that's brilliant to create that talk. But then what are you going to do? What's the next step? You know, what happens next year with that technology? So you've got to keep the conversation interesting. You've got to keep your content fresh, and you've got to keep it out there as well.
Okay. Could you expand on the media pack?
Yes. So media pack, I would say, I would put in there a press release, as I mentioned before. I would have.
And how long should that press release be?
No more than a page of A4. You know, I would keep it. The shorter you can keep it, the better. If you can, you know, get it into less than that, that's great. I would put your low-res images in there as well, and then I would have a fact sheet at the end. You know, are the particular things that journalist needs to know about your particular subject that they should include in the article? Do you have a sort of, you know, the specific statistics, you know, are the reference points, you know, have you mentioned something in your talk that, you know, has to be referenced back to somebody else? Are the books that they should be reading? Anything like that that's of interest. You know, that you're much more likely to get a journalist to write about your brand if you've done the legwork for them. You know, if a journalist has to come back and ask multiple questions in order to get what they want to write an article, they're probably not going to do it. So if it's, you know, if you can give them as much as possible, make their life easy, then, you know, that's the best way. Other than that, if there's anything else that's particularly pertinent to what you're talking about, then include that in your press pack. But again, you know, keep it sort of brief. A page of press release, a few images to tease them in. If they want more, they'll come back and ask for it, but make sure you've got the information to back it up for.
Okay, and you say go to maybe start off with smaller publications,
Yeah.
because it just gets you looking like you're quotable and so forth.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And, you know, a lot of the smaller publications are specialists in particular fields. So find the publications that really specialize your particular area that you're talking about.
I think that's definitely something that's worth doing for you. Like I've got my housemate, all right, so it's not related to talks or anything like that. Had some mental health problems. She decided to write a blog about it, sent this like small article off to a mental health thing. It's like been seen 250,000 times because it just got straight in, and then she's ended up getting this new little stream of just writing her sort of thoughts down through something like that.
Yeah.
For all of you who are quite technically minded, particularly those of you who are running tech companies, we talk in the training about having quite inclusive expertise. So you've got to appeal to experts in your field, but you've also got to bring people into your world. Well, if you're going into some of the more technical and specific publications, you can actually elaborate in much more depth than you can in a TED talk about some of the things that you're talking about. So that could absolutely be a way for.
And that will definitely add to your content as well. You know, as I said before, content is king. The more that you can expand on a particular subject, and that's really important. So we've got a question here. What's the rule,
Stevens.
Ed? What's the rule on holding too strong to controversial opinions? I mean, it depends on sort of what those opinions are, really. There's kind of no hard and fast rule here. But you know, if it's really important to you, then you know, stick to those opinions. But what I would say is you do run the risk of alienating people. So if part of that particular opinion, you know, if you're wanting to attract other people who have the same opinions as you, then I would hold on to them, you know, personally. You know, I think a bit of controversy obviously will stir a conversation, but what you don't want it to do is to turn into something where people hate you because of it. And the balance between being controversial and hated is a very sort of thin line. So, you know, I would say be careful about that. And, you know, but you know, if it's something that you really strongly believe in, then that's a part of the makeup of what you're kind of putting out there, then I think it's important.
Ed, I'm going to bring you on for a sec. So you started talking about public call-outs. You're live.
Yeah, hey, thanks for the talk. It was really helpful. Yeah, I just know Peter Thiel gets out there quite a lot, and he's made a really big name for himself for his sort of he's unabashed about just sort of taking his opinion, researching it well, and then just going back against the grain as a means of kind of, I guess, creating friction, which sort of amplifies his story. And like sometimes there are sort of those opinions, but you're just kind of like, well, let's say at the moment, you know, everybody wants to talk about fintech or AI and startups, and it's kind of like there's a popular drive in that way, and you may want to go against the grain. But at the same time, I don't think I want to sound like I'm sort of beating a drum when I make some points. So it's just like, it does seem to create more amplification because you're saying something different, but at the same time, it's just like, I don't know.
I think if you're sort of going against the flow of, you know, that you are going to be noticed more than if you're just saying the same thing as everybody else. You know, I think that's why people like, say, Katie Hopkins has made a name for herself, because essentially I think that quite often what she does is it has nothing to do with her set of beliefs. She just says things to be controversial, and it's actually it's a PR stunt. And I think that actually what's happened is, you know, it's backfired on her now, and she's taken it too far, and then has sort of slightly vanished, to be honest. But so what I would say is, you know, if this controversial opinion that you have in particular, if you're saying it because it's something you really believe in, great, but don't just say it to be controversial.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
The quickest win is for people. What's the shortest amount of time thing you can do, the laziest thing you can do to get the biggest result?
That's a good one. I mean, I think that, you know, getting yourself on TV obviously is sort of, it's not necessarily quick per se, but it could be. You know, what I would say is when you've done your talk, I would personally, if I was you, I'd reach out to all of the kind of news TV, you know, on the TV, radio stations, all of those kind of things, and just get in touch with them, and, you know, put together a little sort of biography on yourself, a link to your talk, and, you know, show that you can be a really great spokesperson for that particular subject. I think that's a great thing, because potentially, you know, they, as I said before, they may happen to be talking about something that's relevant. They need somebody to come on and chat about it. Again, making sure that you can back up all of your statements that you're making in there. You have some great statistics to back that up as well. You know, put some knowledge, put some background in there of why you're an expert in this particular area. And I think that that's a really good quick win. You know, obviously generating press coverage and things is a great thing. You know, you'll find with press coverage, sometimes you'll send something out and it will just hit the mark with people and they'll run with it. Sometimes you can send it out and you're sort of bashing your head against a wall for a while until somebody, you know, kind of jumps on it. And then also social media is a great quick win, because, you know, if you can say something, you know, like Ed was saying, if there's something in particular that kind of, you know, strikes a chord with somebody, you know, even if it is controversial, then, you know, it could turn into something really sort of quick and loud without you sort of realizing it. So in answer to your question, I think that, you know, your quickest win really is to get it, if you can get onto a news program or something like that, because again, that will build your content and it will build your sort of presence out there in the media.
In London, for those of you who are, and I'm sorry, Kurt, because you're across the pond and I keep doing this, it's just because I live here, buddy. London Live is a channel that I've been on before with I didn't put any, I don't even know how I ended up on there, but I think someone in the TEDx Clapham team mentioned to them that we were running an event and they were like, God, we need people on, basically. Yeah. And then I was able to go on, and just even having the photo of me, London Live, like even that stuff on social media can start to build your PR side up. And
I mean, Kurt, if you're over, are you over in the US?
I'll bring you on, Kurt. You're on, Kurt.
Yes.
Yes, yeah. Okay. I mean, you know, one of the you know, great things about this day and age is that, you know, we're all kind of global citizens, so to speak. So, you know, unless you're talking about something that's very, very particularly focused on your sort of locality, then, you know, the media are interested from all around the world. But, you know, one of the great things about being in the US is you have so many outlets over there that, you know, we sort of view the US as being one country, but it's kind of, in British terms, it's made up of many, many countries. So, you know, you have this fabulous opportunity of being able to reach out to so many different publications, you know, in all the different states over there, and you know, and spreading the word from that side. So, you know, I think you're in a really sort of fortunate space there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If I can get any excuse I have to come to London, I'll welcome.
Say again?
I said any excuse to come to London, I welcome. So
perfect.
So there's one more question I had for you that came into my head when you were talking, and you mentioned the follow-up side.
Yeah.
How long do you leave it before you follow up with the journalist? Because most of them aren't going to get back to you, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, when I was interviewing people for the book, you know, we talked about to journalists, and you know, the average journalist is getting about 400 emails a day. You know, so that's a lot of stuff to go through. So, you know, one thing that I didn't really touch on in particular is your subject line. So you've got to really nail it with the subject line, because that's going to be the thing that gets them to open your email. And then that leads on to your sort of opening paragraph. But I think the thing is, you don't want to upset the media by chasing them all the time. There's nothing worse than being like, hi, have you received my email? Because they will not talk to you. But what I would say generally is, you know, a week or 2 weeks after you sent the email, I would then follow it up with another one just to say, just wanted to make sure you received my previous email. You know, if there's any more information you need, just let me know. You know, you'll get a variety of responses from that. That will be either nothing from that person, or you'll get them saying, oh, I didn't receive the email. They did, but it's just got lost in the ether. So at least they're looking for it there, and then you can resend the stuff that you sent. Or they'll say, thanks, but I'm not interested. Or they might say, yes, I got it. It's, you know, something that we're looking into. They may even say, yeah, brilliant, actually, I'm looking at it now, and, you know, we want to run something on that. So, you know, don't piss them off by chasing them, but I would say a week or two after you sent it, then just, you know, send a little message or whatever. The other thing to do with the journalists to engage them is start to follow these people on social media. and start to engage in a conversation with journalists as well. You know, all of them are on social media now. If you can actually get your name in front of them, then when your email pops up with your name, then suddenly you're like, it's that guy I've been talking to. He's really interesting. You know, he's got some great things to say. So, you know, if you can get your name in front of them, then that's a really sort of important thing. With that in mind, I would say, you know, try to keep, if you're promoting yourself as an individual, try to keep your social media handles as your name if you can, rather than kind of some weird social media handle that has no relevance to something that you're called, unless you want to be anonymous. So yeah.
Cool. Simon, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
Really useful. Hope you lot found it useful too. I mean, it's some nods from he's kept quiet, Ivan, but he's been nodding away. Any questions you lot have for Simon that come up over the course of the next week, let me know. But your homework for this week, which I'll post on the group, is very, very simple, and it is create your own press release. And you've already got a load of the content for that, so it shouldn't be too difficult. Other than that, you've got to crack on with your talks, because next month they're getting filmed on the 7th of Jan. So the clock is ticking. It's nearly under a month away. That is your homework for today. Look forward to catching up with you all on Tuesday. But other than that, that is goodbye from us, and we'll see you next week.